Hi, and welcome to this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today is Derek Santos. He is the Executive Director of the New Bedford Economic Development Council.
How's it going, Jim?
What's happening? Good to see you.
Doing well.
We want to talk today about and I want to make sure I say the name correctly because it's a long one, the New Bedford Golf Course and Advanced Manufacturing Campus, the project that has been in the news for a while, been looked at, developed, just designs and what have you. A big project and one that could be a big boon for the city down the road. Very exciting, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting projects that we're working on at the EDC, and we work with everything from a small business starting out in the downtown to a $30, $40, $50 million mill redevelopment project to offshore wind,
right,
and the advanced manufacturing campus now at the golf course. And what's exciting about it for us is we're working closely with all the city departments, city council, state agencies like Mass Development, of course the operators of the golf course, park board. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of folks pulling in the same direction on this one. Which
is good too, because a lot of projects you don't see that. So when you got everybody pulling in the same direction, it really does make it a community project.
Yeah, it does. It's complex. This is certainly fun, but there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of pieces that need to fit together. And it's going to take some time, as many complex things do, right? Think of it like a renovation of your home, right? It's exciting, but there's a lot of things to do. It always takes longer than anybody wants.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention to the details, don't lose sight of the big picture, things will generally work out well.
So tell us, at least give us an overview. What is the campus?
So if you take the municipal golf course now, it's around 250, 260 acres or so. And now is configured as a 18-hole course on that whole site. There's a portion of that site closer to the Dartmouth town line that we can essentially carve out 100 acres of almost exclusively upland land, which means no wetlands, right? The business park in the north end is huge, but huge swaths of that are all wetlands. So
and that's key, right? The wetlands versus...
Exactly, because you may have a 50-acre site in the business park in the north end, and only 12 of those acres are actually developable. So the 100 acres that we're able to sort of carve out on Hathaway Road from the golf course are almost entirely upland. So the yield for development is quite high. And it's exciting because we're able to do that, maintain the ability to have a 18-hole course, still championship length, and sort of ignite, if you will, improvements both in terms of safety and access to Hathaway Road, while most importantly from our perspective is the ability to take land that's generating no tax dollars right now, it's open land, and over time, generating new jobs, new construction, of course, new commercial tax revenue for the city, while also being able to upfront finance much needed improvements to the course and the clubhouse and those amenities, and again, spark those safety improvements on Hathaway Road.
When you look at a project like that, is that something where it's all built at once, or is it built in stages or something like that?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So it's most likely that we will have a master developer that says, here's the game plan for what we want to do for these 100 acres. Could be split up into four or five parcels, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending on what their game plan is. Think of it like a campus. That's why we call it that, right? Where everything sort of works together. Having that all built all at once, right, we would consider that would be fantastic.
Yep.
I consider that unlikely. The New Bedford Business Park started in the 1950s, and Plumber Supply basically finished the last big development project there 2 years ago, right?
Wow.
So that took a big chunk of time. This is not going to take 50 years. It's likely to take 5 or 6 years for the full build out of the campus from what we're seeing now. 4 or 5 lots, figure like one a year, right? So about 5 or 6 years for that full build out to happen.
So you could have, though, different amounts of businesses depending on who's going in. I mean, you could have, if there are 4 or 5 lots, you could have one business, but you could have a couple in the one.
Yeah, it's entirely possible that there's a proposal that comes to the city, which I should state, right? So the city will put out an RFP, what's called a request for proposals, right? Developers, other businesses will respond and say, here's what we think should happen there based on the guidelines that the city put in place, both the city council and the mayor, and say, hey, here's how we meet those guidelines. We have a great proposal. And those proposals could be, we have one business that wants to do a campus, but it's all for them. Company X, right, wants to do, several buildings on one site, it's one company. We think what's probably more likely is a proposal where there's sort of, imagine one anchor business, right, sort of a big site. It's important to keep in mind that this site has great highway access. There's rail access right behind the site, as well as the New Bedford Regional Airport, which is only right down Hathaway Road, one light, take a left turn, you're at a fantastic regional airport, right? So we think that perhaps one anchor business and then some other, smaller or mid-sized businesses around that is perhaps what's most likely. And developing over time, I think.
The funny thing is, when you talk about the anchor, I was thinking of a mall when you just kind of talked about it. I mean, when you, like the malls and whatever, you always want an anchor store or whatever, and then you get the subsequent other stores in there.
Yeah, industrial sites really, or business parks, are not much different in that way.
Yeah.
It's sort of an anchor is sort of that main thing that attracts others.
Right.
It works in that same way. I think a good point there is the types of uses, and when we've done this presentation before, we've been careful to lay out what types of uses will go there. So big retail, like big box retail, like a Target or Walmart, that's not what we're targeting here.
Right, yep.
The uses here are targeted towards manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. So that type of big retail, residential, that's not what's planned here. This is about expanding the commercial tax base, creating new jobs in advanced manufacturing ventures for the citizens of New Bedford.
And the business park's a good example of, you're talking about anchors, but getting other types of businesses in there. But I mean, there's no retail in the business park. So what you're saying makes sense for people who may not understand that.
Yeah, exactly. So you might have the proverbial sort of, there's a small bank branch, and there might be sort of a small convenience place where you can certainly get your cup of coffee and a sandwich and that type of thing. So that's sort of what we would call, in my business, an accessory use. But the main thrust, like at the business park, is Titleist, Ahead, HTP, those sort of big companies are there. You have smaller companies, of course, and then you can still fill your tank up with gas when you're coming in or leaving, and go across the street to the bank and cash your check, those type of things.
You touched upon it briefly, but why this location?
Well,
you talked about the land for sure.
Yeah, so certainly that, but this may be one of the best greenfield sites in the Commonwealth for redevelopment. And the first person I heard say that was the former Secretary of Economic Development for the state, Jay Ash. And Secretary Ash came to New Bedford for a developers conference we were doing, showcasing a bunch of different sites, not even the golf course at that time. And he on his way down from Boston wanted to stop by and take a look, and he said, his quote to me was, "This is a no-brainer. You have tremendous highway access. You have a site that's fully serviced by infrastructure, broadband, water, it's just fantastic. No real wetlands. You have an airport nearby, and you have a area of the Commonwealth that, as pressure from Boston, pushes down, where prices are so very high, that we're at a great competitive advantage to attract the very type of users that we want.
Really?
At prices that are more than what we're used to, because the costs in Boston are just so astronomical that what's a deal for a developer who's looking in Boston, inside the sort of 495 Beltway, is a tremendous value here. So you need to be selling a product, Jim, that people want to buy, right? So land is no different than that. And we know from reports that we've done with our partners at Mass Development and private firms like Honeyman, have basically said in a study that we commissioned a year ago, certainly pre-COVID, but New Bedford is as their term, is a competitive disadvantage if we don't sort of have a product on the market. Because these developments are going to happen. They're going to happen. They just won't happen here. This puts us in the game.
And are there a lot of sites in general in New Bedford for development, like big sites like that, land-wise? I don't think so.
No, there are not. And I can assure you, if there was a simpler site, a larger site, where we could grab 100, 200 acres, sort of just add on to the business park in the north end, we would absolutely do that.
Right.
But the reality is, if you look at everyone's has a smartphone now, so you can go into your maps function, and you will see a very densely populated city.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have 200-300 acres that's just available for redevelopment. We had to look very carefully at how we would do this, how it would make sense. In this particular case, how can we do this and actually maintain the recreational asset for golfers that are playing now and folks that have said, gee, I've never played golf before, but a revamped golf course, and a new clubhouse and everything, I'm gonna give that a whirl. That was really important to Mayor Mitchell and the rest of the team.
One thing that I was thinking too when you were talking about the site itself, the proposals, the road, access roads in and out, you really can't do anything until you know what the proposal is, right?
Yeah, so...
About water and just utilities.
Yeah, so Massachusetts is, if you're a developer, there's a really high bar to develop big projects in Massachusetts. Not just New Bedford, the entire Commonwealth.
Yep.
And so there's a state permitting process, right, called MEPA. I'll try not to be overly technical in that, Jim, but they look at traffic, they look at environmental, they look at historic, they look at utility, everything that you can imagine. The package is quite thick for a developer to have to propose something. To know exactly what a development needs to do, you need to know first what the development is, right? So what we know is we have strong guardrails in place. Think of the Market Basket site on Coggeshall Street. That's the project that made those improvements to Coggeshall Street and fixing those off-ramps finally, adding that signalized intersection finally, better pedestrian access, right? Handicap accessibility. All that was required because of the state and then the local enforcement of those permitting regulations, right? Without that project, those things don't happen. So you need that proposal to know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And different proposals may be larger or more impactful than others, and some may be spread out over a longer period of time. So improvements may be phased in. We'll see what happens when we get proposals back.
I'm just curious too, because I don't know the answer to this, but it's only one developer, right? I mean, you don't have multiple developers developing the site, right? Or do you?
No, that's a great question. So what we're proposing is that there's a master developer for this site.
Okay.
So imagine that there's a difference between the person developing the site and the companies that go there.
Okay.
Right? So think of it as a cul-de-sac with 15 beautiful houses on it, right? Usually there's a developer that says, this is the plan that we want to do. We've acquired the land. This is the road that we want to put in. These are the type of homes we envision, right? And then people buy their parcels, right?
Yep.
And then they build their own individual homes, that fits into this sort of, they've created a new neighborhood. Same type of thing.
Okay.
So we think it's likely that there could be partnerships, maybe between a master developer. We were talking about the anchor tenant before.
Right.
That's entirely possible. But that's the type of proposal that we're going to see. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we want to see a very smart and well-executed proposal that matches the values of this community, right? Which is, what is your environmental track record? What is the sustainability of your roadway and landscaping and buildings that you're proposing? The types of companies that you want to attract. Are they a good fit for New Bedford, right? Are you a good partner?
The developers attract, in a sense, the businesses.
Exactly, because the developer is saying, hey, I have the authority from the city to develop these 100 acres. These are all the amenities of this particular site. The city is a great partner to work with. Are you interested in your next 100,000 square foot expansion or a new facility, coming here? And I think it's important to say that successful projects always work in partnership, where you have developer, business, folks from the EDC, and of course the city. And that's the city department, city council, mayor's office. When all those folks are working in partnership, you're going to get exceptional results. So when you have a project like this, where right up front the city's saying essentially, this is what we expect.
Yep.
So a developer knows what we expect. We're being transparent up front.
Yep.
The developer has to pitch back, here's how I'm essentially answering that question. in terms of what you expect. So everyone's on the same page from the beginning. That's the reason we're doing it that way. Let's be transparent. Let's be on the same page from day one so we can have the best results, of course for the developer, of course for the company, but from our perspective, most importantly, for the citizens of New Bedford.
And you folks have been adamant too about the improvements to Hathaway Road as well, because I know there were concerns about the traffic and what have you, but that's something that you guys are pretty adamant about, that there's going to have to be improvements to Hathaway Road.
Yeah, so we've all lived here long enough to know that that's, at best a tricky road. I drive on that road all the time, at least 3 times a month. I run up and down Hathaway Road, so I can.
That hill's killer.
I know you do as well. So it's not at all pedestrian friendly. Those intersections are not at all well handled, and it could be executed much better. So one of the goals is, how do we make that road, of course it has to provide safe access for a new development, but how does it work better for the folks that live there now?
Right.
The folks that drive there now, the businesses that are there. I know the hotel site across the street from the golf course would certainly benefit from a safer, better Hathaway Road. And we're envisioning at least the study of improvements on the New Bedford side, all the way down to the Building 19 site,
Yep.
as well as going into Dartmouth.
And there are a few houses there too.
Absolutely.
And developments inside the area.
Yeah, so a developer will have to look at Hathaway Road from essentially the Building 19 intersection all the way down past those lights, all the way through Dartmouth.
Wow.
to where it comes into Route 6, and take a look at that holistically, and then prove to the city and the state that what they're proposing absolutely meets everything that's required. And in some cases, and I'm going to go back to Market Basket, we wanted to see some enhancements beyond what was required. In that case, the developer worked with the city through a state grant program to have additional enhancements beyond what was required, because it's what both parties wanted to see, and it worked out really well there. Without knowing all the details up front before it's happened, we see a similar pathway happening here.
So the city and the state are really working together with this project, because the state has a role too. I mean, New Bedford obviously has a role, but the state has a role too, and it seems like they're pulling in the same direction.
The Commonwealth, both in terms of the governor's office and our legislative delegation, on the Senate side, on the House side, all want to see Massachusetts maintain its competitive advantages as one of the best performing economic states in the nation, right? And Massachusetts has great tools to make that happen. One of the whole reasons we're doing this project and able to advance it is a program from the state called Site Readiness, right? So all of the consulting work, engineering work, drafting of zoning language, RFP language, all is actually being funded by a state program. So the city of New Bedford, taxpayers aren't paying any dollars out of the city budget to fund that work. We had to compete for those grant funds with the state. We said, we have a good project. It's going to be good for not just New Bedford, but for the region, good for the Commonwealth. The state looked at that and said, we agree. Yep. We'll fund that work. We're reviewing that work to make sure it's okay. But that's a good example of sort of a state and a local government partnership. That happens all over the Commonwealth, but we've been pretty successful in New Bedford pushing those along.
Talk about the golf course, because I know that's been, I mean, you talked right at the start. You've got a golf course there that people play at, but I mean, you're looking to make enhancements to make golf more attractive for the average person in New Bedford.
Yeah, we see this as, so from my perspective at the EDC, we see everything through the opportunity of attracting good business to New Bedford, right? So when we're talking about the potential of a 100-acre advanced manufacturing campus to attract business, and you tell me that there's a golf course right next door, I see that as a huge advantage.
Oh, you could have a lot of meetings there, for crying out loud.
Yeah, to attracting companies there. So we say, okay, having the golf course is great. Can we improve it? Can we have a better clubhouse? Can we have better amenities? Can we have a nicer entrance, better parking? Anyone that's played there knows that that's a little bit of a struggle. And can we make improvements to the course itself? And we spent a lot of time working with specific consultants, specifically on golf, working with our DPI, with the city's facility folks, also with other private sector professionals on the infrastructure piece to really dig into the nuts and bolts on a real granular level on what's it going to take for all of those things, the course itself, those improvements, what's it going to take, what's it going to cost, how's it going to lay out, how's it going to work, months and months and months of work. And we know two things, right? We know that regardless of anything else, there can be a great new clubhouse, a great new entry, great new parking, fantastic. Everybody wins in that scenario. And we know that there's a need to improve all those things, right? We also know that the city can basically have its choice. There's enough physical space if you want a 9-hole course with options for driving ranges and practice areas and smaller, for putting greens and everything. You can have all of that, or you can maintain your 18-hole course, and there are a couple of options there as well.
Is it in the same footprint, the golf course?
It's 100 acres smaller, but we know that we can maintain. And the goal was, and came from Mayor Mitchell, you have to show me an option that maintains a full-length 18-hole course.
Golf course, okay.
And that took time to work out. But I think that was a sort of a smart directive. Good planners, good engineers, good consultants on that, and we're able to do that. I know it's everyone's preference to maintain that full-length 18-hole course, and we're sort of geared up for that. We're excited about that.
And the thing is too, with the new clubhouse and things like that, it's a new function facility too. There's other things that can go on in there as well for the golf course.
Yeah, anything that's going to attract. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that there are folks that have been playing there for decades, right? So who are your customers now, right, Jim?
Right.
So we want to make sure that those gals and those guys there are saying, I'm better off than I was before.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm going to have better facilities and at least a course that's as good. And we think with some of the improvements that we're able to make, even a better course. I'm talking about the greens and and everything
Just
else.
the amenities.
For play itself.
Yep. And the challenges.
Yeah, exactly. That's a challenging course, as everyone knows. The other advantage is that now you have an amenity, a public amenity, where you might be able to attract folks who have not really thought about playing golf in New Bedford before. And this is a great public course.
And the location helps.
It's easy to get to. It's incredibly cost effective, right? And if you think golf is something that you want to do, we want to make sure that citizens in New Bedford have the best possible recreational amenity that they can. The sale of the land to a master developer is going to allow that to be financed in that way. So that's fantastic. It's great for existing golfers. We think it's going to be a boon to attracting new golfers. And of course, from my perspective, it's a huge asset in attracting companies to invest in New Bedford. By the way, not just for the 100-acre site, but for the city as a whole.
Right. We've talked a lot about, we talk Hathaway Road and the golf course, so there's a lot of bonuses here. Talk about the number of jobs and the tax benefits for the city with this project. I mean, obviously you wouldn't do it if the city wasn't getting economic development out of this.
Yeah, so there has to be rationale, right? So we know that there is private sector interest in greenfield development, right? So we have customers out there.
Yep.
But the local rationale for actually anything we do revolves around, are we creating jobs that New Bedford citizens are going to compete really well for, right? We want to, particularly emerging out of COVID, we want to come out really strong after COVID. So job creation, and of course the expansion of the commercial tax base. Because when you can expand the commercial tax base, you're really lowering the collective burden for the residential tax base of a city. That's true of any municipality. So those are big numbers for us. So the golf course project, the advanced manufacturing campus, that 100 acres, all the planning that we've done, and there are probably 4 or 5 good options for laying out those buildings, Jim, but you're probably going to yield about 1 million square feet, the potential to yield 1 million square feet. In the end, it could be a little less, it could actually be a little more. I think around 1.25 is the maximum square footage. So somewhere in that range of 1 million. We're conservative, we'll call it 1 million. We know that will yield, for the type of businesses that we're attracting, about 1,000 jobs, right? So we've done the research on that.
And the goal is new jobs.
Yeah, these are all new jobs. So these are all new jobs, right? This is a green field, so everything there is new. New taxes, new jobs. If it takes 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, all of those are added to what we have now. That's the goal. We did a lot of work with Mass High New Bedford, right, to help us understand what those kind of jobs are specifically, what the educational requirements are for those jobs, training, associate's degree, a few jobs with more than that. What's a good fit? What are the pay ranges for those jobs? I know we have information in the slide deck that sort of details that out. So we know that, 1,000 jobs. At the end of the day, might it be 922?
Right.
Maybe. Could it be 1,158?
Yeah, you don't, right.
Yeah, so it's going to be in that range. And to be honest, it's probably going to fluctuate a little bit over time, just as it does in the business park. The business park's around 3,000 jobs, and you'll see that number go down a little bit, go up a little bit. It fluctuates in that range. So we're excited about those new jobs, and really excited about the opportunity to work with Mass Higher New Bedford to partner from day one, greenfield development, to make sure that recruitment, training, all of those things are sort of working seamlessly. We're excited about that. When you talk about taxes, same type of thing, right? We worked very closely with the CFO's office, the assessor's office, to understand, okay, this is new construction. We don't have a ton of greenfield new construction in New Bedford.
Right.
So the assessor's office looked at some of the most recent new construction in the business park, which dates back to like the late 1970s in some cases, to try to understand the value of square footage for what we're looking at here. The bottom line is that full build out, when you do all the math,
yep.
Jim, right? You're looking at just under $2.7 million in tax revenue at full build out. Now, some caveats. That's today dollars, assuming that everything is built out today.
In one day, yeah.
As we said, it's not going to be built out in one day.
Right.
That's going to happen over time, right? So every new tax dollar that's going to come in is going to be new tax revenue to the city. That of course we know. But I want to be completely honest, right? That's going to take several years for that to come into play.
But it doesn't happen unless you get the first one.
But unless you start, you stay where you are, which is zero, right? So that's going to take 5, 6, 7 years to happen. The other question that comes into play as well. This is someone doing could be plumber supply, for example. Someone's going to do a $15, $20 million investment, right? They may want some stability in the commercial tax rate, even though it's all new. There's a program there's a state program that New Bedford uses maybe 3 or 4 times a year, commonly referred to as the TIF program,
yep.
right? For new investment. For that to happen, a company has to be making new investment. They have to meet very strict criteria set forth by the city council and the city's TIF board, and create jobs, right? So they have to play within some strict set of rules. Generally what happens is the new taxes that come into the city for that, and there are just a couple that were approved by City Council recently, those are sort of slowly ramped up over a period of time, usually 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
In the city over that period of time, it goes from sort of getting about 50% of the tax, and then it ramps up to 100%. So we want to be honest that it's likely that projects that are being proposed are going to meet those criteria. Those private companies are probably going to want some stability there
at the start,
protect their investment at the start. And again, this is only at the start. And so those new taxes are always going to be coming in every year. It's always going to be more. But over that 5, 6, 7 year period, that's when you're going to start to see that ramp up to full. 8, 9, and 10, now you're at sort of full tax.
Right.
And every year you're getting new property tax.
And as you said, with this particular project, you're looking at 5 or 6 years being at full build out. So the years add up really.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is values go up, right? So
Right.
something that's worth $100,000 now, 5 years from now, the assessor's probably going to tell you that's worth maybe a bit more
Right.
than $100,000. So those numbers are going to increase.
We are out of time.
Jim, thank you so much for the opportunity.
It was great to talking to you, and we'll be keeping up to date with you. Obviously, if you've got more updates, we can talk about those as well. But thanks for coming in and explaining the project for folks.
Jim, thanks for the opportunity.
That's going to do it for us. For City Hall Insider, I'm Jim Marshall, the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.